lot of the work that we do all over the world we end up in these kind of situations where there might not be much of a context, and this was definitely one of them. There was nothing on the site.
The subway station was under construction.
The subway was under construction, and we understood the design of 10 and 30. That was actually really interesting for us to think about how we land, what do we do with this project.
You know, without having any real buildings around you, it starts to be more about the city. On one hand, we had to deal with all these crazy site constraints, but on the other hand, we had this sort of freedom to think about New York and what is a New York building and what does that look like, how is it articulated?
Well, there was no context, but there was the High Line that, you know, is a piece of infrastructure we plug into being at the end. I think we were lucky that we were at the end of the High Line.
It's such an interesting thread that goes throughout the city. I think that allowed transcending kind of its immediate context, and it had to do with the industrial kind of character of the High Line and the West Chelsea and meatpacking, it all the way down to like Soho. But it had this sort of grit and this grain. It was important that we didn't want it to be shiny, that we wanted the building to have a little bit of...
It's almost a little bit raw.
Raw and textured. And
some contrast with the sort of sculptural, more glass-oriented facade of 10 and 30.
Yeah, there is something about texture, the scale and the facade. It feels very accessible.
Not abstract, but something that you could finitely say, okay, that's a 10-foot by 10-foot window. My body can relate to that.
And also leaving the materials as close to their sort of most natural state, I think, was also something that we had a lot of success with in this project. You see a metal and it feels and it looks like metal, and you see a stone and it feels and it looks like a stone.
It's such a direct translation from what's literally physically available sometimes too, right? Getting the right consistency of the seam face, being able to pick those slabs and really going down and looking through actual inventory and stock that's available.
Subliminally, people understand about this building is that you can actually see into it. It's not a reflective surface, and you see depth, and you see people working, and you see workstations, and you see light fixtures on the ceilings, and you know something is happening.
People will change, and the attitudes and interiors will change, and you'll sort of get to live the life of the building.
Yeah.
One of the details that I get asked about the most is actually the rounded corner. And it goes back to the idea of scale. So even, you know, when you are in this space and you're in an office, you experience that characteristic of the building.
And I remember the day that the broker who was like, well, can you taper the verticals on the outside? And I think we were all sitting together in a meeting and we thought, instead of tapering it, could we step it? The evolution of that discussion with a real estate broker and concern about the loss of a view and led to the expression of the building. Actually being able to carve away, deform a little bit to create these outdoor rooms. When you are on that floor plate and then you open the door, you're having a good day or you're having a bad day, you can walk outside and you've somehow transformed your experience.
It's interesting how that progressed. In the initial phases, it was sort of an ideal, and everyone sort of bought into it conceptually, and then we just sort of shelved it as it went out to bid, and then as the leasing efforts went along, it sort of, you know, people wanted them.
I mean, they were basically selling terraces as the pours were happening. It was such a selling point for leasing. You know, I think we're all pretty happy with how it turned out. It was really driven by a lot of things like efficiency, structure, and MTA.
All of that exciting stuff.
I mean, they were really boring drivers, but I think it pushed for more creative problem solving.